My mom was furious when I refused to let her access my savings to cover her gambling debts. The same woman who disowned me when I got sick and told me I was a burden. Then the entire family turned against me, so I just walked away smiling. And then I did what no one expected. I'm Julian, 34 years old, and this is a story about how my own family became the biggest obstacle in my life and how I finally turned the tables on them. Growing up, my mom, Mary Ann, was always the kind of person who could charm a room full of strangers but treated her family like pawns in a game she was playing. I never understood how she could be so two-faced until I got older. Outwardly, she was the perfect mother and sister, but behind closed doors, it was a different story entirely. When I was a kid, Mary Ann had a temper like no other. Small mistakes meant hours of cold stares, sharp words, or worse, complete silence. She demanded perfection, and if I ever fell short, I became invisible, like I was a ghost that didn't deserve attention. Her favorite phrase was, "You're lucky I even keep you around." But nothing compared to the moment I got sick at 22. I was diagnosed with a chronic illness that made working impossible for a while. Instead of support, I got accusations that I was lazy, that I was wasting the family's time and resources. My own mother, the person who should have been my refuge, disowned me. She told me I was a burden, a mistake she regretted having. She cut me off financially, emotionally, and socially. When I tried reaching out, she blocked me from family events and warned others to stay away. I was devastated, but I had no choice but to pick myself up. I moved to a new city, found a modest job, and started saving every penny I could. I wasn't rich by any means, but after years of hard work, I built up a savings account that was mine and mine alone, my safety net in a world where I had learned not to trust those closest to me. A year ago, I got a call from my Aunt Carol. She's Mary Ann's sister, and until then, I hadn't spoken to her in almost a decade. "Julian, I hate to bring bad news," she said, her voice hesitant, "but your mom's in trouble. Big trouble. She's got herself into some serious gambling debts, and she's asking if you can help cover them." I was stunned. The same woman who had disowned me now wanted me to bail her out? I sat there, silent, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Carol went on, "I know how she's treated you, but she's desperate. You're the only one she thinks can help her." I told her I'd think about it, but deep down, I knew my answer. That money wasn't hers. It was mine. I didn't owe her a thing. A few days later, Marian called me directly. The voice I heard was a strange mix of desperation and entitlement. "Julian, you have to help me," she said, trying to sound calm but failing. "I'm drowning here. If you don't send money, I'll lose everything." I didn't mince words. I told her no. That savings was my hard-earned security, and I wasn't about to give her a penny to cover the mess she'd made herself. That's when the storm really started. It began with cold shoulders and silence. My Aunt Carol stopped answering my messages. Then my cousin Ezra, Mary Ann's son, started sending me passive-aggressive texts about family loyalty and doing the right thing. At first, I tried reasoning with them. I reminded them of how my mom had treated me when I was sick, how she had abandoned me. They refused to listen. Instead, they painted me as greedy and heartless. The family gatherings I used to attend turned into battlegrounds. Whispered conversations stopped when I entered the room. My relatives looked through me like I was some kind of enemy. Mary Ann herself showed up at my workplace one afternoon. She stood outside my office building, shouting my name until I came out. "You owe me, Julian," she yelled. "I gave you life. How can you treat me like this?" I stood there, calm, and said, "You gave me life, yes, but you didn't give me kindness or support. I owe you nothing." Her face twisted in rage, but I simply turned and walked away. After that, the harassment escalated. Mary Ann and Ezra started spreading rumors about me. They told everyone I was selfish, that I was trying to cut them off for no reason, that I was hiding money while refusing to help my own family. My small online business, which I'd quietly built over the years, became a target of mockery. Ezra called it a joke and told others it was never going anywhere. I kept my head down, refusing to respond to the drama. But inside, I was planning something. I wasn't going to let them win. One night, after a long day of work and ignoring another round of nasty messages, I sat down at my computer and looked over my business. It was small, but I'd been growing it slowly, piece by piece. If they thought it was a joke, I was about to prove them very wrong. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Carol, and the tone was different than before. "Julian, we need to talk. It's about Mom." Carol's message haunted me for the next few days. I wasn't sure whether it was an olive branch or another trap. I debated ignoring it altogether, but curiosity, and maybe a part of me that still wanted some family connection, got the better of me. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe halfway between where I lived and where the rest of my family still gathered. The place was quiet, dimly lit, and felt like the kind of neutral ground where things could be said without the usual audience. When I arrived, Carol was already there, stirring her coffee nervously. She looked older than I remembered, worn down, maybe, or just tired of carrying the family's secrets. "Julian," she began softly, "I don't know how to say this without making things worse, but Mom's situation is worse than I told you. She's not just behind on some bills. She's in deep with people you don't want to cross." I nodded slowly, trying to process. Gambling debts were bad enough, but when it spirals to dangerous people, that changes everything. "She's been borrowing from loan sharks, Julian. They're not the kind of people who send polite reminders. They've been showing up at her door, threatening her." Carol's voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw something vulnerable in her eyes. It wasn't sympathy for me. It was fear for my mother, the same woman who disowned me like I was trash. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because," Carol said, "she asked me to reach out to you. She wants to make a deal." "A deal?" I barely concealed my disgust. What kind of deal could my mom expect from me after everything? Was she going to ask for money again? Or something worse? Carol leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "She wants access to your savings. Not as a loan, but to use however she needs. She's desperate, Julian. And the family is starting to turn against her. Without your help, she might lose everything, including her home." I felt a familiar anger simmer under my skin. Marianne had spent years treating me like an enemy, then suddenly expected me to save her from herself. And now, the entire family, my aunts, uncles, cousins, they were pressuring me too. "They're all in on this?" I asked. Carol sighed. "Not all, but most. Ezra especially. He's furious you won't help. Says you're tearing the family apart." I thought about Ezra, my cousin, who had always been my mom's favorite, the golden child who never had to lift a finger but could do no wrong in their eyes. He was the loudest voice condemning me, the one who spread rumors like wildfire. "I'm not their charity," I said quietly. "Why would I hand over money to people who treated me like I didn't exist?" Carol looked at me sadly. "I don't know, Julian, but things are worse than ever. Mom's in real trouble." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, turning over every part of the conversation. Marianne had been a villain in my life for so long that it felt unreal she was suddenly the victim. But even as Carol painted this picture of a woman drowning in debt and danger, I couldn't forget how my mom had treated me when I needed her most. I remembered the hospital visits when I was too weak to stand, and she never showed up. The coldness in her eyes when I told her I was sick. The way she called me a burden in front of family and friends. Those memories were like scars that never healed. I thought about the business I'd built quietly while she was burning through money. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The one place where I had control, where no one could belittle or threaten me. And yet, here was my family, asking me to give it all up to save the woman who made my life miserable. Over the next few weeks, the pressure from Marianne and the rest of the family increased. At first, it was phone calls, pleas, veiled threats, guilt trips. Then it escalated to showing up unannounced at my apartment, leaving angry notes taped to my door. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find a group of people waiting outside my building. Among them were Marianne and Ezra, along with two other relatives I barely recognized. They looked like they were ready to confront me. I stepped outside cautiously, my heart pounding. "Julian," Marianne called out, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. "You can't just ignore us. You owe this family, your mother, everything." Ezra stepped forward, sneering. "You think you're better than us just because you moved away and started that silly little business? You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back." The others murmured their agreement, their eyes filled with contempt. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I owe you nothing," I said firmly. "You disowned me when I was sick. You told me I was a burden. I'm done being your scapegoat." Marianne's face twisted, tears of fury streaming down her cheeks. "You ungrateful child," she spat. "You'll regret this. I swear it." The family's campaign to break me continued. They spread rumors, turned neighbors against me, and even tried to sabotage my business by leaving fake negative reviews online. Every time I thought they'd stop, they found a new way to hurt me. But through it all, I kept my focus. I poured myself into my work, stayed patient, and refused to respond with anger. I realized they wanted a reaction. They thrived on drama and chaos. The more I stayed calm, the more unsettled they became. Then, one day, something shifted. I got an unexpected message on my business email. It was from a large company interested in partnering with me, something I'd been working toward for years but thought was out of reach. The timing was perfect but felt almost too good to be true. I knew if I could land this deal, I could finally secure my future and show my family that I was capable of more than they ever gave me credit for. But sharing this news with them? That was a line I wouldn't cross, not yet. A few days later, at a family gathering that I had resisted attending, I found myself sitting quietly while Marian bragged about how she was trying to fix things with me. Julian's been so distant, she told the group, her voice dripping with false sincerity. But I know he'll come around. He's family. We just have to be patient. Ezra smirked from across the room, tossing a glance at me that said, not for long. They didn't know what I was planning. They didn't realize that the more they tried to drag me down, the stronger I was becoming. The more they mocked my efforts, the more determined I was to prove them wrong. And then, just when I thought the tension couldn't get any worse, Marian made a move that changed everything. She called me late one night, her voice cold and sharp. I'm coming over tomorrow. We're going to talk, Julian. Face to face. No more games. I hung up without a word, knowing this was not going to be a simple conversation. It was a challenge. The entire family was watching now, waiting for me to break. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. The night Marian said she was coming over, I barely slept. I kept running through possible scenarios in my head, wondering what she was really after. Was it another attempt to guilt me? A trap disguised as a family talk? Or something else? Morning came gray and heavy. I didn't want to be the one to open the door, but when she knocked, loud and persistent, I had no choice. I pulled it open just enough to see her face, tight, strained, eyes burning with something like fury and calculation. Julian, she said, voice sweet but brittle, we need to fix this. You're tearing the family apart. I stepped aside without a word. She swept past me into the living room, already slipping into the role she'd mastered so well, the victim. I know you think I don't care, she began, voice wavering just enough to sound sincere, but I'm struggling. I made mistakes. I'm sorry. I sat down across from her, studying her carefully. I'd heard that act before, the fake remorse and sorrow. But beneath it, the woman who abandoned me was still there, the woman who called me a burden, who left me to fight alone when I was sick. You want my money, I said plainly. That's why you're here. She shook her head, eyes shining with false tears. No, Julian. I want us to be a family again. But I need help. I'm drowning. I looked at her. Help comes with responsibility. You've run your life into the ground, and now you expect me to clean it up? After all these years? Her jaw clenched, but she kept up the act. I was desperate. I didn't know where else to turn. I leaned forward, voice low but steady. That's the problem. You don't think of anyone but yourself. You threw me away when I needed you. And now you want to come back and pretend it never happened. She didn't answer. After Marian left that afternoon, the family drama only worsened. Ezra, who had always played the part of the charming golden boy, turned more venomous than I'd ever seen. It started with small digs. At family gatherings, he'd lean close enough for me to hear and say things like, "You could be so successful if you stopped being so selfish." Or, "Mom wouldn't be in this mess if you just helped like a decent person." But the barbs grew sharper. He began talking to others behind my back, spreading lies about me hiding money and scheming to cut the family off entirely. One day, I overheard a conversation between Ezra and my Aunt Muriel. They were laughing quietly about me, mocking my business as a little side hustle that would never amount to anything. "It's funny," Muriel said, shaking her head. "Julian acts so high and mighty, but he's nothing compared to what Mom and Ezra built." Ezra nodded, grinning. "He'll learn soon enough. Families stick together. You can't just walk away." Hearing that, I felt something inside me shift. They thought I was weak, that I would crumble under their pressure. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. The family gatherings became more hostile, with whispered conversations stopping whenever I entered the room. The stares were cold, filled with contempt. My own relatives turned into a pack, ready to tear me down at the slightest chance. One particular evening sticks out. It was at a birthday party for one of my cousins, and I showed up despite the cold reception. Ezra approached me in front of everyone, smiling that same smug smile that always made me want to shove him. "Julian," he said loud enough for a crowd to hear, "I heard your business finally landed a deal. Must be nice to have money when the rest of us are struggling." The crowd laughed uneasily. I felt my face flush, but kept my voice calm. It's been a long road, I said. I'm proud of what I've built. Ezra smirked. Proud of scamming a few small clients? Don't flatter yourself. Before I could respond, my Aunt Muriel chimed in from behind, loud and sharp. You think you're better than us because you moved away? Because you made a few sales online? You'll never be part of this family again. That was the moment I realized I was truly cut off. The people who were supposed to be my family were now my enemies. They were willing to ruin my reputation, sabotage my business, and humiliate me publicly to protect their own image. Despite all this, I kept working quietly. I spent long nights responding to emails, improving my products, and looking for new opportunities. Then one morning, I got a call that changed everything. A representative from a national distributor wanted to meet. They were interested in my business, ready to discuss a partnership that could elevate everything I had worked for. It felt surreal. After years of being mocked and belittled by my family, here was proof that I was on the right path. But as I hung up, I realized I had to be careful. If my family found out, they'd try to sabotage it. I needed to protect this opportunity, keep it quiet until I was ready to strike. Meanwhile, Marianne's desperation reached new heights. One evening, she showed up at my apartment again, unannounced and unwelcome. I need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the living room. Her eyes were wild, frantic. Not here, I said firmly. You're not welcome. She laughed bitterly. You think you can shut me out? You're nothing without me. I shook my head. You're wrong. I'm everything without you. That night, she left after a tense argument, but her threats lingered in the air. The final straw came at my youngest cousin's graduation party. Marianne, Ezra, and Muriel were there, and from the moment I walked in, the atmosphere was thick with hostility. As I tried to keep to myself, Ezra made a public spectacle, loudly questioning my achievements in front of the entire family. Funny how Julian pretends to be successful, he sneered. Still living off mom's charity, isn't that right? A hush fell over the room. I could see the whispers starting. Then Muriel stepped up, her voice cold and deliberate. You think you're better than us, Julian? You're nothing but a disappointment. You should be grateful we even allow you to be here. The words cut deep, but I held my head high. I wasn't the one with debts and a trail of lies. That night, I left early. Alone in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, exhausted but resolute. They wanted me to break, to beg for forgiveness, to surrender everything I had built. But I wasn't going to give them that victory. I had spent years watching them tear me down, lying about me, and using their power to control the narrative. Now, it was my turn. I was done hiding. I was done being their punching bag. It was time to show them exactly who I was and what I could do. After that humiliating night at the graduation party, I knew I had to stop running. The damage they did was more than emotional. It was beginning to poison my reputation in the community where I lived and worked. If I didn't act, everything I'd worked so hard to build could collapse. But I wasn't going to stoop to their level with petty arguments or public fights. I decided to be smarter than them. I would make my moves quietly, carefully, and with precision. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to win in a way they never saw coming. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I gathered screenshots of their messages, recordings of phone calls where Marianne and Ezra threatened me or tried to intimidate me, and copies of the slanderous reviews posted about my business. I also started looking into their financials quietly, through public records and business registrations. I knew Marianne's gambling debts weren't the whole story. There were hidden layers beneath the surface, and I was determined to find them. Within a week, I uncovered some troubling details. Ezra had been funneling family money into a side business that was failing spectacularly, and Muriel was involved in a series of shady property deals that left tenants in terrible conditions. Their so-called family empire was built on lies, greed, and neglect. Instead of confronting them immediately, I used this information strategically. I contacted a local journalist known for exposing scams and shady dealings. Without giving too many details, I hinted at a bigger story behind the family's public image, a story about financial manipulation and betrayal. The journalist was intrigued and started digging. At the same time, I ramped up the quality of my business. I hired a small marketing firm to boost my brand, improved my product line, and began networking with industry insiders. The partnership I'd been working on finally came through, and I secured a contract with a national distributor. Suddenly, I was no longer just the family outcast. I was a rising entrepreneur with a legitimate, growing business. Meanwhile, the family's attacks didn't stop. They only grew more desperate. One afternoon, Marianne showed up at my workplace, uninvited, making a scene in front of customers. She demanded I hand over money to cover her debts, claiming I had a moral obligation to help the family. I calmly told her, "I'm not responsible for the choices you made. If you want help, start by taking responsibility." Her face twisted with rage, but before she could respond, the store manager came over and politely asked her to leave. The scene embarrassed her badly, and I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Ezra's attacks moved to more covert methods. I found out he was spreading false rumors to my business partners, trying to convince them that I was unreliable and unstable. Some of my contacts started pulling back, unsure whether to continue working with me. But I didn't panic. Instead, I confronted the partners directly, providing proof of Ezra's lies and sharing my vision for growth and stability. Most stood by me, grateful for the transparency. Muriel, on the other hand, tried to get into my personal life. She spread rumors at community events and social clubs, telling people I was selfish and ungrateful. She even convinced a few acquaintances to stop doing business with me, poisoning my local support network. But I turned the tables by volunteering for community projects and being visible in local events. Slowly, the narrative started to shift. People saw through her manipulations and began questioning her motives. The real turning point came when the journalist published an expose revealing the family's financial mismanagement and shady dealings. The article hit the local news hard. Suddenly, Marianne was facing calls from creditors, and Ezra's failing business was under investigation. Muriel was forced to deal with angry tenants and legal complaints. The family's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and I was watching from a distance, knowing I had set it all in motion. That same week, I received a call from a lawyer representing the family. They wanted to negotiate a settlement to keep the damage quiet. Marianne begged for my forgiveness and promised to pay back debts if I helped cover some of the costs. I laughed quietly. "I'm not interested in silence or forgiveness," I told the lawyer. "What I want is justice. If your clients want to make this right, they'll start by admitting their mistakes publicly and repairing what they broke." I didn't hear back for a few days. Then, at the next family gathering, which they insisted I attend, they were different. The smugness was gone, replaced by nervous glances and forced smiles. Ezra avoided looking at me altogether. Marianne's voice was shaky when she tried to speak. Muriel kept checking her phone, as if waiting for an escape. I stood quietly, watching them unravel, the weight of their own guilt crushing them. And for the first time in years, I felt the calm power of knowing I was no longer their victim. After the expose and the legal threats, I thought the worst was behind me. But the family's final secret was worse than I could have imagined. It wasn't just financial mismanagement or petty lies. Marianne and Ezra had secretly signed over ownership of the old family business, one that had been the source of their wealth and power for decades, to themselves in a way that deliberately excluded me. They had done it years ago, quietly erasing my name from any claim, leaving me with nothing but memories and bitterness. This revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. For years, they'd acted like I was the outsider, the problem, while they held all the cards behind closed doors. But instead of breaking, this news ignited something deeper inside me. I hired a forensic accountant and a lawyer to dig into the paperwork. We found that the transfers were done under suspicious circumstances, with forged signatures and misleading documents. There was enough to challenge the entire transaction in court. The day the lawsuit was filed was one of the hardest and most satisfying moments of my life. I sat in the courtroom, calm and collected, as the judge listened to the evidence. Marianne, Ezra, and Muriel were there, looking defeated but still unrepentant. They tried to paint me as the greedy outsider, but their own records and actions betrayed them. The judge ruled in my favor, declaring the transfers invalid and restoring my rightful ownership of the family business. That victory was more than financial. It was a statement, a declaration that their years of lies, manipulation, and cruelty would not define me. In the months that followed, I took control of the company, slowly turning it around. I fired the managers who had been loyal to my family's toxic leadership and brought in professionals with integrity and vision. The business began to thrive, gaining respect in the community it had long neglected. Meanwhile, the family fractured. Marianne's gambling debts grew worse without access to the business's resources. Ezra's shady deals collapsed completely, leaving him with nothing but empty promises and burned bridges. Muriel was disowned by some of her own social circles after more people learned of her unethical practices. They tried to reach out to me again, but this time I didn't even respond. There was no forgiveness to be given. No second chances for the people who abandoned me when I was sick, who mocked me when I succeeded, and who tried to destroy everything I cared about. Today, I'm running a successful business with a team I trust and a community that respects me. I'm proud of what I've built, not just the company, but the boundaries I set and the strength I found in standing up for myself. As for Marianne, Ezra, and Muriel, they remain bitter and broken, their empire in ruins because they refuse to see anyone but themselves. And honestly, that's exactly where they belong. So, Reddit, here's where I'm at. I took back what was rightfully mine, exposed my family's lies, and walked away from the toxic chaos they created. I didn't forgive them, and I don't plan to. They burned their bridges long ago. But now I'm wondering, am I the a-hole here? Should I have handled things differently? Did I go too far by making their lives harder? Or was I justified in standing up for myself the way I did? I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think. Would you have done the same? Or do you think there's a better way to deal with family like this? Thanks in advance for your honest opinions. Sometimes it's hard to see clearly when you're in the middle of it all. If you enjoyed this story about standing up to toxic family members and reclaiming what's rightfully yours, don't forget to like and subscribe.